So yeah, just wanted to do an acknowledgement of country. So in the Gulf region, in the Northern Gulf region, we have 22 Indigenous languages spoken, and we're home to 13 Indigenous clan estates. So we'd like to acknowledge all of those traditional custodians of the lands and waters of the Northern Gulf and pay our respects to the elders. In particular, we usually acknowledge the Mullaridji people as the traditional custodians of the land where the Mareeba office is housed. But today I've developed a distrust for the Telstra connection in Mareeba, so I'm working from my home in Atherton, so I'm in Tableland Yidinji country instead. So for those that aren't aware, I just wanted to give a brief overview of who Gulf Savannah is and what we do. So Gulf Savannah is a not-for-profit natural resource management company based in Mareeba with offices out in Georgetown and Croydon as well. We have over 20 staff, and at any one time are managing 20 to 30 different projects across environment, biodiversity, but we also step into the community resilience space as well. And those projects work with all levels of government, researchers and community, and we've been doing that for over 20 years now. Our area is quite a large one, so you'll see there that it's almost the size of Victoria. 90% of the land is that rangelands, extensive grazing, with some intensive agriculture, fishing and tourism on the outer bounds as well. So today, the reason that this whole thing has started is our current Silvopasture project. So it's funded under the TNQ Drought Resilience grants, which come out last year under the TNQ Drought Hub. And it's all part of that drive to build that resilience in businesses facing challenges that come with the changing weather patterns. So for far North Queensland, those weather patterns look like hotter temperatures or hotter average temperatures, more heat wave events. And while the rainfall patterns aren't showing, more or less rain specifically, the way that it falls is looking to change with higher amounts of rain falling in shorter periods, and then a potential longer dry season. So there's things like erosion and water capture and all the bits that come with that, dealing with an extended dry that need to be prepared for. So you would have seen that grazing is 90% of the industry in our region. Timber also has a very long history in our region, probably more on the eastern side. Around this area, lots of plantations and lots of studies and trials have happened over the last probably 50 years. I'll let you touch on that, Holton. But there's not many putting those two together where both are a product. And when I say product, that could be the fruits, the seeds, timber, as a dry season fodder, or tapping into those natural capital markets. So today we're not presenting a packaged solution. We don't, that's not what we're here to do. Silvopasture as a tool or as a model has all the complexities and challenges that everything else does. And what we're looking at is just the synergies and co-benefits that arise when you run timber and cattle and pasture together. But what that looks like on each individual property has to be taken into account, your individual needs. And Holton's going to touch on, what that actually looks, the different faces of silvopasture, because it's not just one model. So the project is partnering with the NQ Forestry Hub. You've heard me say Holton's name a couple of times. I'll introduce him in a sec. And so it's Gulf Savannah working in the Northern Gulf region and the NQ Forestry Hub with their extensive network through Timber Queensland and with the universities that are strong in the forestry space. Looking at the perceptions of silvopasture in our region and producing some technical reports around what that looks like. Specific to our sort of landscapes. So today's speakers, we've got Holton King, the manager from the North Queensland Regional Forestry Hub, and Gus McLaren from the Natural Resource Management He's a Natural Resource Management Officer from the Department of Resources. So after each of them has had their time to speak, we'll have a little bit of question time if we can fit it in after each of those, and we can open up some more time at the end if we have it. And then when we've all finished that, we've got some next steps, just some information on some upcoming events or activities we might be able to run under this project. Right, I am going to stop now and hand you over to our first speaker, Holton. I think you're going to run it from your side. So if you have questions as you go along, just pop them in the chat and I'll try to capture them as Holton's speaking and bring them out when he's done. Thanks, Holton.
Thanks, Casman. Yes, good day everyone. My name is Holton King. I'm the manager of the North Queensland Regional Forestry Hub. And we've been ticking along for a couple of years up here, building a portfolio of projects and technical work to support forestry industry and expansion across North Queensland. And this includes farm forestry, agroforestry, plantation forestry, native timber forestry, forestry products, and the associated supply chain and socioeconomic areas as well associated with the industry, including traditional owners and First Nations forest use and management. So we cover a wide gamut. I grew up in the region. That's me as a young boy on my family's tablelands property. That tree was actually felled on private forest near our back boundary, and it sort of is a bit of a link that I have to the industry from a time ago, and my drive to see it continue and expand in the region is influenced by my upbringing here in the region. So very passionate about this part of the world. So the hub is working across a number of different theme areas, and silvopastoral systems, where I'll be focusing today, is just one of those. But this just gives you an idea of some of the other areas that we're looking at and have projects within. Some of our initial projects have been a literature review and a GIS tool to sort of collate some of the existing online public data. And we've also conducted a supply chain assessment and just about to publish a biomass residues assessment for the region, and a carbon regulatory framework assessment, which is just looking at the barriers and challenges to entry for the carbon market across the industry, as well as some policy considerations as well, and carbon mapping under FullCAM, which is a carbon mapping modelling software that is used to develop the ACCU's estimations for carbon projects. So the timber industry is quite significant to North Queensland, and this just gives you an overview of some of the numbers involved across the region. This industry has a long history in the region, and we have such an abundant resource in many ways across our space that it's worth considering how we manage and build that industry moving forward, considering the demand for our products. But all said and done, we're still a region that is a net importer of timber products at the end of the value chain. So with our forestry and logging industries up here, we're still generating a net import deficit of $161 million worth of manufactured wood products, which we would like to see change in the future and focus more processing regionally to reduce the costs of the supply chain and to raise the incentives for landholders like some of you here today to consider silvopastoral systems for timber products potentially on your properties, and some of the benefits that can derive. This is just a quick example of the GIS platform that we're using to working in conjunction with a number of other projects that are looking at plantation suitability and including this project, which is looking at vegetation, parcels and suitability for potential silvopastoral systems across different landscapes. Our plantation land suitability assessment has identified 4 species that will be under that assessment. but a caveat for this project, for those online, is that this is looking more at larger scale plantation forestry, and these species, albeit more suitable for that style of plantation, may not be the most appropriate species for your landscape or for your land use or end product wants and needs. So for that matter, this is not an exhaustive list of what the hub is looking at as a potentially successful species. Rather, the rationale for each of the species selection is listed as a reason for that more broad scale plantation approach. So sorry to go back, we've just got southern pines, which is the predominant pine species grown in the region already, and that's the species that is currently on our silvopastoral pilot project down in Cardwell, but also in the assessment we're looking at Eucalyptus pellita, or red mahogany, Gympie messmate, and spotted gum. These are strong performers, as it said there, across the board for durability and structural use, and grow well in the region. I won't go into this project too much because we're a bit short on time, but it's just highlighting some of the opportunities, in a way, for new farm forestry and plantation forestry to be incorporated into the ERF's carbon methodology. So this graph here, this table is displaying the number of carbon projects currently under the fund. And it sort of highlights some of the asymmetry with the approach to the carbon market and putting trees in the ground, and highlights the need to potentially look at why there aren't more plantings in farm forestry or plantation forestry. And just a quick other bit of hub facts for everyone today, just some of the first numbers from our biomass assessment, which is looking at some of the underutilized residues from the forestry and wood processing industry. These numbers represent the residue in biomass produced by the industry, and that residue can be used for a number of potential markets, including biochar and animal beddings, cogen energy, and compost. So as a silvopastoral approach to land management, there'll be thinnings involved potentially with your treatment of your plantation, and as a result, looking into what's available as a potential use market for your thinnings is something the hub is also considering, because all of these pieces fit together in the grand scheme of a management plan for forestry or silvopastoral system. And as Casmin hinted at the start, it's a complex approach. There's no one size fits all, and as a landholder, it would be up to you to work with foresters and your best available information to do what you think is best. So Casmin's already gone through the project and its rationale, but yes, this is a co-project that we're doing with the Gulf Savannah NRM, and I'll focus today on our project site down in Cardwell, which has been a pilot project in conjunction with the CRC for Northern Australia, and we have we have Central Queensland University, and Queensland Department of Agriculture and Fisheries also working together to make use of this HQ plantation site just south of Cardwell at Damper Creek. Now, this was a replanted site after Cyclone Yassi. It's just west of Hinchinbrook Island, and it's planted with that southern pine. And what the project sought to do was compare different styles of thinning to that plantation, which is now at around 7 to 8 years of age, and then introduce graze cattle across those treatments with weigh bridge stations and water points across a period of time to measure their productivity and to also measure the pasture quality and the forest quality and any other qualitative considerations that may come about of the pilot project. So it's been going on for over 2 years now, and this year is the final year for this project, and so we're looking at wrapping up quite soon. And so whilst this isn't a finalised project, there are still some findings that have come out from it and some observations which I'll be able to share with you today. This is a shot just from that that site down in Cardwell. A great shot showing a pasture alley that's been created by a wide treatment or a wide thinning treatment. And what's happened here is they've reduced the stand of pine by a number of alleys to create a space for pasture to grow. And I'll show you some of those numbers from that project shortly. This is just another slide showing that OptiWay system that's used to measure the cows, growth average over the period of the project, and any other considerations there. The cattle are also fitted with a GPS collar, which can also track their movement across the sites. So the final project technical report will have some summaries as to what that looked like over the period of the project and what that may mean. But silvopastoral systems, as Casman also pointed out, don't necessarily mean rows of pine plantations on your property to graze cattle amongst. Whilst that might be a good option for some people in the vicinity of a processor that's making use of southern pine, if you're not on that supply chain or looking to use that timber product for a different purpose, may it be for building your own timber structures or bush poles on your own property, or fencing for your own property, or for a different timber product, you may decide to apply a different silvopastoral approach. So whilst the numbers and the summaries from the projects that have currently been undertaken by the Hub provided today are looking at a very particular style, it's not an exhaustive approach to silvopastoral systems, and this project with Gulf Savannah is hopefully going to ascertain some of the more bespoke or regional specific approaches that might suit the Gulf Savannah landscapes, more so than some of the traditional alley cropping methodologies which you see here in the bottom left of that diagram. So yeah, you can use trees on your property as windbreaks, as many of you may already know, but silvopastoral systems are incorporating livestock amongst those trees, and that may not necessarily always have to be cattle. We have a potential landholder just south of Cairns and Ingham looking at using trees to assist with his free-range chicken enterprise. So there are different ways you can do it, and you can also incorporate it within your existing windbreaks or riparian forest buffers, as also demonstrated by that diagram too. This is just another summary of that silvopastoral site south of Cardwell, just with some more numbers for anyone who's interested. 31 heifers per treatment was the MLA calculated number, and some of the agricultural gains being assessed as the water quality and soil conservation and carbon sequestration. Those are purely qualitative assessments though, and we haven't been able to do any quantitative assessments on a lot of those, but we do have some numbers on other things. I'll just go back. Oh no, that's right. And this is comparing that site to the MLA site down in Gunnedah, which is a Forest and Wood Products Australia project. And this project is more of a use of a grazing property rather than a use of a plantation property, and probably more appropriate for landholders looking to enter or start their own silvopastoral system. But it looked at 3,000 hectares of native forest regrowth category X in an area that has a mean rainfall of only 613 millimetres a year, which is a lot different to the very wet coastal conditions at the other side. And it used an economic analysis of the site to run net present value numbers for 5 different forest management scenarios, as listed there on the slide too. What would happen if you were to clear the whole site for grazing? What would happen if you were to do no thinnings or treatment of your native forest and no harvest? What would happen if you were to just do some thinnings or silviculture treatment of your native forest and how that would impact your grazing operations. What would happen if you were to only do harvesting of your timber, and what would happen if you were to treat and harvest that native forest along with your grazing operation. So here are some of the numbers from that project to give you an idea. And the net present value chart along here to explain it shows, I guess, capital outlays versus incomes over the 38-year management scenario. Sorry, the management scenario from 2019 to 2038. And out of the 5 different treatments, the combined grazing and timber production here, it did return a higher net present value over the period than just grazing. And that's because the thinnings and the treatments that took place back in 2019 allowed for a greater volume of forest products to grow over the course of the project period, and also allowed for greater grazing revenue across the project period too. Now, that's not to say that the initial reduction in pasture and the plantings doesn't impact your short-term output for grazing revenue. However, in terms of planning for future drought resilience, some of these decisions made today with support from government funding might be able to provide you with resilience down the line when some of the impacts from heat waves or climate variability take an impact, and having some form of drought resilient wood species, timber species on your farm to provide shade or to improve water quality or soil health could be a good option. So I might leave it at that, Casman, just in the interests of time, and see if anyone has any questions they want to ask. I do have an FAQ, but I'm happy to take some questions first, and I might run through that FAQ just to give you some extra context. So I've got John here saying, would ACCUs be an additional income stream if the planting was new? And to answer that, John, yes, it would be an additional income stream, because under the ERF you can undertake a new plantation methodology to generate ACCUs, provided it's within the framework of the LRF. Yes, and John, that's right. So this project on the Cardwell site has also used Aaron Soanes from CO2 Australia, or previously CO2 Australia. He's a private consultant now, to do the carbon modelling for this site, and he shows that at the 60-year mark, you can start to see, if you had the ACCUs for a 60-year period, you would show more profitability. But the carbon market, as everyone knows, is variable, and talking to a carbon consultant about that in conjunction with a forester would be a key consideration if undertaking this, and looking for those revenue streams as well, because those need to be managed and planned for at the start, project inception, and not incorporated down the line. Cool. Well, Casman, I might just also quickly, if I've got 2 minutes, just run through an FAQ.
Yep.
And I don't know if anyone, can you see the FAQ here on the screen, or can you still see my presentation?
I can see.
See in PowerPoint still?
Yeah, it just says end of slideshow. Actually.
Oh, end of slideshow, sorry. So I can stop sharing. I'll just stop sharing that. So during the trial, the average daily weight gain, it differed over the 3 treatment sites, and the heavy thinning and the light thinning treatment sites. And when I say light thinning and heavy thinning, I'm talking about the amount of trees removed to create pasture growth. Saw an average daily gain increase between 0.283 and 0.397 kilograms per day. So it suggested that the light thinning approach at the moment has the potential to yield comparable kilograms of beef per hectare, whilst also growing trees and being able to sequester more carbon. And is there a market for the trees that you grow is another common question that we get, and that will come down to the species that you select. But David Sims is on the presentation today. He's the hub chair and also runs the Mareeba Softwoods sawmill, and he currently takes southern pine up to a certain size from HQ plantation sites, and is always looking for more potential sites to plant pine for that mill. So there are certainly existing markets for certain species, but some of the more bespoke species of timber, harder woods, that might be more suitable to some of the dry areas of the Gulf Savannah region would still have a market, but it might be a small market that could potentially even better suit a smaller landholder operation rather than a large commercial one. And is it more difficult to muster stock between trees? Well, that's obviously a subjective thing depending on the treatment and the approach. But in the case of the Cardwell site, having the alleys was easy in some ways, but the trees themselves were planted on mounds to assist in the drainage of the forest alleys. And as a result of the mounds, it made mustering the cattle slightly more difficult. But these considerations and learnings from the Cardwell site are going to be summarised in the project report, which will be available hopefully before, well, hopefully soon, the end of this financial year around June. And you'll be able to see more about some of those qualitative grazing considerations from that report. So, Casman, that's pretty much my presentation today. Did anyone else have any other questions they wanted to throw?
Um,
Trying to see if there's anything else there.
Do you want to actually just hop on and speak, John, and shoot your...
Oh no, hang on. These trials have been interesting finds between pasture species. In the trials, has there been any interesting finds between pasture species / quality in amongst trees versus cleared country? Well, we weren't able, unfortunately, to secure a control site with just clear grazed pasture in that immediate vicinity of the plantation. But we do have some areas nearby that I believe the project's team are going to use as a semi-baseline to compare. Obviously, total pasture production will be lower, but there is evidence from CQ that weight gain can be higher in tree paddock versus cleared. Yes, and we're starting to see that in those average daily gain increases, John, that potentially, whether it be more time chewing cud or time in shade and less stress, is leading to weight gain increases in those areas with the alleys.
Which are you referring to, a particular study, John, or?
I'd have to look it up, but obviously, you know, the old adage is just you have trees, high tree basal area, lose pasture production, lose weight, which is what we've all sort of been taught for a long time. But I think a bit of the research and focus on tree plantings and HR methods and that side of things force people to sort of weigh that up in a more sort of with a higher degree of rigor, and study out of CQ sort of showed that peak animal performance wasn't at 0 trees per hectare. It was sort of somewhere in between there because of the benefits to either animal health or something more about the different pasture species or pasture quality that you get there based off higher shading of trees, giving more soil moisture, all these other additional benefits that are very hard to sort of quantify in a complex system. And sort of now that I'm in the carbon world and promoting tree growth, it's a topic that I'm looking
I don't have
more.
full details, but I thought that was the basis of that Stake and Wood sort of project, which was measuring what the optimum tree to tree ratio was to cows, and I think it was around 30% of your paddock was around about that.
Yes, which goes against the old 0%, which is what is what most people sort of like to roll with.
Yeah,
Certainly what I rolled with for quite a while.
Yeah, cool.
Thank you.
So I guess this project is showing that you can exceed that 30% if you incorporate your future revenue from timber production, harvest, as well as carbon sequestration revenue from ACCUs. Those people interested in exceeding that optimal 30% for potential future drought resilience in the future, or for timber income as a drought resilience option. That's what that project's looking to quantify. So they do work hand in hand together, the MLA Stake and Wood project and the CRC Silvopasture one in Cardwell. But yeah, thanks for those questions, John. And really good.
Karen's just come through with, is quality of the meat over the hook analysis going to be studied? Stress. So that would be to measure the stress levels. And is that what, Karen, feel free to pop on and correct me.
I think that's, yeah, those things are difficult to quantify in the field with what we're doing. So what we're looking at is hopefully just an assessment that can show weight gain or some other qualitative features of the cattle in regards to their stress levels. But I'm not sure if it's going to be meat over the hook in terms of the analysis. I don't think the graziers are going to take it that far in terms of tracking their cattle. And are we looking at aspects of biodiversity? Well, the QDAF staff are doing their Transect study of the pasture within the site to do a pasture biodiversity assessment. So that will show the change in pasture makeup across the sites. Our silvopastoral project isn't funded to do any biodiversity mapping currently. However, this Perceptions project with the Gulf Savannah will be looking to do a road trip and bringing staff from the University of Sunshine Coast along to potentially visit sites or landholder properties to look at their landscapes and some of their existing biodiversity levels. Biodiversity credits are another thing that some landholders can look into if they're looking at doing combination of biodiversity services and carbon credits. They can all be developed under the forestry methodology with a forester assistance, but that's probably beyond the scope of this project and something you'd look at separately.
Very good, thank you.
But I guess it would go to, just to finish on that just really quickly, it goes,
yeah.
It stands to no surprise that having a plantation or a forest or a managed native forest on your property as opposed to cleared land would increase overall biodiversity on your property. Yes. Thanks, Casman.
Thank you. If I can just get everyone who's willing to pop their cameras on for a minute, I just want to take one screenshot and then I'll move on to Gus.
I can't seem to get it to come on my phone, Kaz. Okay. Sorry.
Oh, good.
Oh, hold on.
Oh, good, Kelly. We'll Photoshop you in, hey?
Yeah, it just says unable. Right. You can just stick figure me in the corner.
Okay, no worries. I'll take a shot now. Thanks. Okay, so Gus, are you happy? I'll share your presentation from my end. Is that okay? Preferred?
Yeah, no, that's yeah, no, that's great. That'll work nicely.
All right, so I'll let you introduce yourself and
great, thanks, Casman.
Hopefully that's popped up.
So I'm Gus from Department of Resources, working in the Vegetation Management Unit. But by way of background, I'm originally from Zimbabwe. Worked on native and planted pastures, well, pasture management mainly. A certain amount of sort of agricultural and rural development projects across Africa as well, and came across quite a lot of actually quite advanced silvicultural sort of developments and things like that, both agro as well as sort of plantations and everything in between. So kind of all aspects of agroforestry. Anyway, that's just background. Today, what I'm talking about, basically vegetation categories, because this is important, and clearing for any kind of potential silvopastoral activities. Next one.
Hang on, I have lost my mouse. Just 1 second. I'm going to have to stop sharing and start again.
That's all right.
Okay, let's try again.
Okay, next one.
Yep.
So I'm going to sort of just touch on two aspects to this. First of all, I'll look at vegetation categories, what that means to us, why it's important. And then secondly, looking at the options for clearing in relation to agro-silvopastoral activities under the Queensland Vegetation Management Legislative framework. So that sort of guides us as to what we are not allowed to do in terms of clearing vegetation. Next. So it's important, first of all, to understand that tenure of the land is important because we can, depending on tenure of the land, we can or can't do different activities, which is tenure tied. The second thing is that not only is tenure important, but obviously vegetation. And this is the regulated vegetation that we're talking about. We can get our mapping. It's freely available, either directly through vegetation management reports. We can download if you know the lot and plan of your property, or alternatively, you can go onto Queensland Globe, again, if you know your lot and plan of your property, and you can look at different maps and stuff there. So next one. The first one that's important is the regulated vegetation management map. And this shows us where we've got areas of remnant vegetation on our property. As the dark blue areas, we refer to them as category B areas, where we've got cleared areas, which are basically essentially still cleared or only recently kind of started to revert. Those would be the category X areas, the white areas. And then where we've got some level of advancement of the regrowth, redeveloping, we call those category C areas, or the high value regrowth areas. We've got a couple of other areas, category A, those are sort of protected areas for one reason or another. Category R areas, which are really buffers around regulated watercourses. So that's the first map that we need to look at. Next one. Second one is the Vegetation Management Regional Ecosystem Map, which tells us or gives us the regional ecosystems or vegetation types across our properties. And depending on the need for conservation of those different types of vegetation, if there's a lot of that particular type, we'd say it has least concern requirement for conservation. If there's less than 10,000 hectares left in Queensland, we say it's of concern, and we need to start to be a bit careful about what's going on. And then if we're down to or towards 1,000 hectares left, then we regard that as endangered. And this is mapped across Queensland, these regional ecosystems maps, and with the dark colours being the remnant vegetation or the category B, and the pale colours being the category C or regrowth areas. Next one. So if we've often we hear comments about that the mapping is incorrect or something or other like that. There are ways and means through what we refer to as a property map of accessible vegetation, or a PMAV for changing the mapping. Next. We've got a hierarchy of things that can occur under sort of different conditions. So the easiest thing is, depending on the tenure and the vegetation mapping that we got, some activities might be exempt. We don't need to tell anybody, we can just go ahead and do it. Sometimes there are or aren't conditions relating to that, but generally speaking, it's straightforward. If you can't do it under those, then we've got some codes all that's required there. Again, so long as you adhere to any conditions attached to the code, is just a notification. There's no costs and things like that. Potential for an audit at some stage, but that's basically it. Next one is an area management plan. This is usually worked in concert with, sorry, I'm going to have to go and get a battery. Sorry about that. Just hold it.
Joys for technology, eh?
Can I just ask, where is Gus based? Is he North Queensland or?
Yeah, he's in Cairns. Aaron?
Thanks.
So maybe while he's doing that, I might just jump in with some stuff I was going to do at the end. I'll just pop in the chat. So at the moment, as part of that work that we're doing with Holton, the current activity is to get this survey filled out as much as we can, which I'm just going to pop in the chat now. So that's just to sort of give us some idea of where people's current levels of understanding is, and sort of feed into that more technical report. So I'll put that in the chat. I'll send that out as an email as well afterwards. If we can get as many people to fill that out, that would be awesome.
Oh, geez. Okay.
All good.
Sorry about that. I forgot to plug in bring my charger. Right, up to area management plans. Doesn't really apply much for us here, unless you're going to water courses and doing weed control. And the final one is, hardest one, is permits. You have to do a development approval. Next one. So now I'll just look at these more specifically. Exempt clearing work. This typically would be things like alley cropping in Category X areas, planting fodder species in Category X areas, and some development of infrastructure in Category B, C, and R areas. In terms of codes, native forest practice can be carried out on freehold land on Category B and C areas under the Veg Management Act, fodder harvesting in Category B areas, specifically mulga, infrastructure development that can't be done under the exempt can be done for Category B, C, and R areas. We use an avoid and minimize principle here, where essentially what we're doing is, can those areas not be done in Category X areas first? For example, putting up sheds, things like that. Managing regrowth and density of regrowth areas, Category C and R areas, can be done under a code. These are for relevant REs, not for all vegetation types. Essentially, the sparse, very sparse, and mid-dense vegetation types, these are the ones which we can manage under regrowth density code. Weed control is something that's done sorry, for or under the codes, and this is for all the regulated vegetation. That'll be Category B, C, and R areas. Area management plans for particular pests in the dry tropics, and it's really a weed control one. Next one. Finally, coming to development approvals, if it's out of scope for the exemptions or for the codes, then we can sometimes apply for permits. for permits, it's really important to understand that it's got to be for a relevant purpose. Under Section 22A of the Vegetation Management Act, and unfortunately clearing for grazing or pasture purposes, under the current legislation at least, is prohibited. Managing of thickened vegetation, which we are unable to do in under the code, which only applies for regrowth areas, but for managing the remnant areas, the Category B areas, and more extensive cases for the Category C and I areas require a permit. And under native forest practice, if we want to go into leasehold land, this will be on Category B areas, but that would be under the Forestry Act. The timber on freehold land is owned by the landholder. Timber on leasehold land is owned by the state, which is why you'd need to get a permit under the Forestry Act in this case. What is completely out of scope for us under present legislative conditions is managing and density and of regrowth areas, also thickened vegetation, which is not under relevant regional ecosystems. Under native forest practice, we're unable to undersow woodlands with non-native palatable species. So, you know, there might be some really useful forage trees that we could use in the Category X areas, but we can't undersow the native woodlands in the when they're in either remnant or regrowth stages. In terms of management, there is a certain amount of scope for thinning and things like that under native forest practice. However, thinning to a monoculture under the codes, you can't do that. Similarly, under the managing regrowth or managing thickened vegetation, again, you can't thin down to a monoculture. It's really important under these codes to maintain biodiversity. And the final one is under the native forest practice code, you can't use that as a means or a subtle way, background way to improve grazing. We heard earlier on, and there's quite a lot of evidence to show that thinning trees will allow more light, less competition for the pasture layer, and to allow a greater amount of pasture to develop underneath. And that's fully understood. However, under present conditions, we can't use the Native Forest Practice Code to achieve that. Next one. Yeah, so that's just quickly an overview, kind of the vegetation management framework in relation to the clearing of trees for sort of agro-silvopastoral activities. Any kind of additional information, because there's quite a lot involved in here, can either call the Veg Hub on the number given there, or email the vegetation@resources.qld.gov.au. And there's our website, which will allow you also to get copies of the vegetation management maps, or of course you can always visit a local resource office. So yeah, over for any questions which might come from there.
Very good, thanks, Gus. So it looks like it can get fairly complex pretty quickly. So it's the easiest way is probably to look at what layers are on your place and see what you can do from there.
You absolutely have to start with an understanding of what you've got before you can move forward, and then look at the hierarchy to see that you could satisfy for any clearing there.
Yeah. All right. Did anyone else have any questions that they wanted to give to Gus?
Not a question, Casman, but I just thought I'd touch on that aspect in relation to the silvopastoral project that the hub's doing with Gulf Savannah, in that the spatial assessment for silvopastoral systems will take into consideration those existing vegetation management layers when providing an assessment for the hub to show, already where those potential areas may be and which areas would definitely be excluded.
Yeah.
So we don't sort of give anyone any false hope with regard to approaches or methodologies.
Yeah.
Thanks.
All right, I thought we'd just finish with sharing a couple of things that are coming up. Holden, did you have any further details about the next open day at that Cardwell site, or not yet? I've just accidentally closed my PowerPoint.
Still finalising that date. I think we're nearly there, but I'll send that through to you as soon as I get that finalised from Craig.
Okay, and I can send that out to the people on here today anyway. And then the only other thing is that from the 20th to the 24th of May, I have a couple of people coming to the region to do some visits, so they're available for to talk to groups or to individual landholders who might be interested. So we've got Dr. Trin Hewen, is it? I'm not sure how to say her last name. From
Trin Ewan.
Trin, yep, from the University of Sunshine Coast, and also Dr. Thomas Williams from CQ University, who does more of the livestock side of things, but been involved in the silvopasture stuff as well. And then at the back of this project, I'm hoping to do some. We'll just see what things people are looking for at the end, but we do have some funding to do either a farm forestry tour. We might be able to bring up a farm forestry person to do some more individual workshops. I'm just kind of seeing where the interest lies there, so you can keep people up to date with that, or if you have interest, it's just if you let us know, then we can tag you into those things. But definitely, if you would like to be included in that regional tour on the 20th to 24th of May, just touch base so I can add you into the itinerary.
Thanks, Casman.
No, all good.
It's Karen here.
Yeah.
The questions around the different layers, which I've done for my own property, are they available? And there was just another thing too. Are they available to people in regards to potential, looking at a block of land to purchase? Is that sort of information available to potential purchasers if the property is under for sale?
Yeah, I think that it's a bit hard to hear, Karen, but I think you're asking if you're looking at a potential purchase, whether you can see those layers.
Yeah, I'd say so. They're all public layers on Queensland Globe and on the QDAF website, as Gus would attest to.
Yeah, or alternatively, you can get hold of me, and I can talk you through it as well.
You did mention about having the lot and plan number, and sometimes you don't necessarily want to have be contacting real estate agents for what you may be thinking about doing with the property, but to know what sort of implications vegetation management plans do have over potential. I'm talking about something, say, across the road from me. As an example, I don't necessarily want to alarm everybody that I might be thinking of doing X, Y, or Z with the property.
Yeah, I'll just pop up.
You can go on to Queensland Globe and look up the properties, but what I find is many landholders at the end of Telstra's tether, and about the only thing they can do is talk on a telephone, and so long as we can get address, I can look it up on Queensland Globe and go from there. So that's not too much of a problem.
And just with the thinnings, there was just that question, is that going to be put forward to going forward with forestry or on-farm forestry to enable people to go into doing that without too much of a headache?
Sorry, Karen, can you just say that one thing with the thinnings again, the question around thinnings?
Oh, well, the approval processes of going forward, if you're a farm forester and you need to do those thinnings, is there still some limitations on doing that? What I'm proposing for somebody down 10, 15 years, which was raised, something about the farm forestry is not being allowed to do those thinnings. So let's just, are we going in that direction so that it will be less of a headache?
I can't speak wholly on that, Karen, but I could say that if it was a farm forestry project or a project under the ERF for carbon, that it would ensure that you had management rights of that project property for the life of the carbon project, which would be 50 to 80 years.
Yeah, thank you.
If you wanted to shoot it through any other questions, we can then find the right person to get those answers as well, Karen. All right, I think we're a little bit over and I think we are done. So thank you, Alton, and thank you, Gus, and everybody that come along today. David, you didn't want to say anything as chair there? No. All right.
Step down. All right,
Okay.
we'll leave it at that.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Karen. Thanks,
Okay.
Gus. Thanks, everyone.